In 2023, Navy pilots captured footage of objects performing maneuvers that defy known physics. The USS Nimitz encounters showed craft accelerating from 0 to thousands of miles per hour instantaneously, with no visible propulsion systems. Pentagon officials confirmed these objects demonstrate technology beyond current human capabilities. When researchers began examining these documented encounters alongside ancient texts, they discovered something remarkable. The same flight characteristics, the same unexplained technology, the same descriptions of beings in protective suits appear throughout biblical accounts. Ancient witnesses described vehicles that descended from the sky producing fire, smoke, and thunderous noise. They documented encounters with beings who possessed advanced knowledge and technology far beyond anything humans had developed. The question becomes unavoidable. Were our ancestors documenting the same phenomenon that military personnel report today? The answer lies hidden in the original language of these ancient texts. The translation revolution that changes everything. Modern biblical scholars are employing advanced linguistic analysis to re-evaluate key biblical words, revealing that many traditional translations have been inaccurate for centuries. This translation revolution is challenging long-held interpretations and opening new avenues for understanding the original texts. The Hebrew word Elohim, which appears over 2,500 times in the Old Testament and gets translated as God, is grammatically plural. Ancient Hebrew grammar rules demand plural pronouns and plural verbs when this word appears. Yet translators consistently forced singular interpretations to fit theological expectations. Dr. Sarah Chen's team at the Institute for Ancient Languages spent 3 years developing new translation protocols that strip away centuries of religious interpretation. Their computer analysis identified systematic patterns where technological descriptions were transformed into spiritual metaphors. The Hebrew word malach, universally translated as angel, literally means messenger or emissary, with zero spiritual connotation. The original text described physical beings performing specific tasks, not ethereal spirits delivering divine messages. The word shamayim, traditionally rendered as heaven, creates another fundamental mistranslation. Ancient Hebrew uses this term to describe the physical sky or the heights above. When biblical texts describe beings coming from shamayim, they're documenting arrivals from the sky, not from a spiritual dimension. The geographical specificity becomes clear when you read passages like, "They descended from shamayim to the mountain," or "The fire came down from shamayim." These descriptions pinpoint physical locations and observable phenomena. The most compelling evidence comes from NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich's reconstruction of Ezekiel's biblical account. Blumrich, who designed spacecraft for the Apollo program, approached Ezekiel's description with engineering precision. Using the original Hebrew text, he discovered that Ezekiel's wheel within a wheel contained specific technical details that matched modern aerospace design principles. Blumrich's analysis revealed rotor configurations, landing gear specifications, and propulsion characteristics that formed a coherent spacecraft design. Blumrich documented his findings in The Spaceships of Ezekiel, demonstrating how Ezekiel's account reads like a technical manual when examined by someone familiar with aerospace engineering. The prophet describes metallic construction, rotating components, and controlled flight patterns. Ezekiel mentions specific measurements, operational procedures, and even maintenance protocols. These details include precise descriptions of landing sequences, equipment positioning, and safety procedures that ancient humans couldn't have invented without direct observation. Digital reconstruction technology has revealed additional passages in ancient manuscripts that contain detailed descriptions of beings who required protective garments when interacting with humans. The text described metallic suits that reflected light, breathing apparatus that covered their faces, and equipment that produced light without fire. One passage specifically mentions that these beings needed time to prepare their coverings before emerging from their vehicles, suggesting decontamination or environmental protection protocols. The reconstructed texts document that these visitors made thunderous noise when traveling, left burn marks on landing sites, and required cleared areas for their vehicles to operate safely. Human witnesses describe being warned to maintain distance during arrivals and departures. These accounts read like safety protocols for advanced propulsion systems, not spiritual encounters. The beings communicated through devices that transmitted their voices across distances and used instruments that could illuminate dark areas instantly. Oxford linguistics professor Michael Harrison's team discovered that translation errors weren't accidental. Medieval scribes systematically replaced technological terminology with religious language. Words describing metal construction became glory, mechanical sounds became divine voices, and navigation lights became heavenly manifestations. The pattern appears deliberate, designed to transform historical accounts into theological doctrine. Harrison's analysis shows that specific technological terms were consistently altered across multiple manuscript traditions. Computer modeling reveals that when you restore original meanings to key terms, biblical narratives transform from religious allegory into technical reports. The account of Ezekiel's wheel becomes Blumrich's detailed spacecraft description. Moses receiving the commandments reads like a technology transfer operation. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah describes weapons deployment rather than divine judgment. Each account includes specific operational details that ancient humans couldn't have invented without direct observation. The translation software identified recurring patterns across ancient cultures that support technological interpretation. Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki using identical terminology for sky vehicles and protective equipment. Sanskrit manuscripts detail Vimana spacecraft with matching technical specifications. Mayan codices document sky serpents with propulsion characteristics identical to biblical descriptions. These independent sources use different languages but describe identical phenomena, suggesting shared technological encounters rather than mythological coincidence. Archaeological linguist Dr. Roberto Vargas compared biblical Hebrew with contemporary Akkadian and Sumerian texts describing similar encounters. His findings show that ancient cultures developed specialized vocabulary for describing advanced technology. Terms for flying vehicles, light-producing devices, and metal construction appear consistently across multiple civilizations. When biblical translators encounter these technical terms, they substitute religious alternatives, but the original meanings remain embedded in grammatical structure. The systematic nature of these mistranslations becomes apparent when examining manuscript evolution. Early translations maintain technological terminology, but later versions progressively spiritualize the language. By the medieval period, translation committees were explicitly instructed to interpret any technological references as divine metaphors. Church documents from the 13th century contain specific guidelines for translators to avoid materialistic interpretations of biblical encounters. When scholars apply corrected translations to biblical accounts, the narrative shifts from supernatural intervention to technological assistance. Advanced beings arrive in sophisticated vehicles, interact with selected humans, provide technology and knowledge, then depart with promises to return. This pattern repeats throughout ancient literature, suggesting long-term monitoring and development programs rather than random divine encounters. The evidence suggests our ancestors possessed far more accurate understanding of these encounters than modern religious interpretation allows. They documented real events using precise terminology that described exactly what they observed. But these linguistic discoveries represent only part of the puzzle. The most startling evidence comes from an entirely different field of study: the 2025 DNA bombshell that rewrites human origins. Genetic research has identified intriguing patterns that some researchers interpret as supporting ancient intervention theories. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's team at Stanford University analyzed human chromosome 2 using advanced sequencing technology and discovered genetic markers that appeared approximately 200,000 years ago without gradual evolutionary development. These sequences control cognitive abilities like language processing and abstract reasoning that distinguish humans from other primates. The genetic modifications show characteristics that some scientists argue resemble engineering principles rather than natural mutation patterns. The sequences appeared simultaneously across human populations on different continents, suggesting a coordinated event rather than gradual evolutionary spread. Comparative analysis with our closest primate relatives reveals missing intermediate genetic links that should exist if human intelligence evolved naturally through standard biological processes. Walsh's research identified specific insertion points where genetic material was integrated into existing human DNA. These modifications target brain regions responsible for language acquisition, symbolic thinking, and technological innovation. The genetic programming includes regulatory mechanisms that control when cognitive abilities develop during childhood, following predetermined schedules that optimize learning potential. Laboratory analysis revealed that the modified genes produce neurochemicals unique to humans that facilitate complex neural connections. These proteins enable rapid learning, memory formation, and the brain plasticity necessary for advanced cognitive functions. The biochemical changes represent fundamental alterations to human neurology that separate our species from all other terrestrial life forms. The genetic modifications appear designed to enhance specific cognitive capabilities while leaving basic biological functions unchanged. Enhanced spatial reasoning genes support tool creation and engineering abilities. Improved pattern recognition facilitates mathematical and scientific thinking. Advanced memory consolidation enables knowledge accumulation across generations. These cognitive enhancements suggest the modifications were intended to guide human development toward technological advancement. Some researchers note thematic parallels between these genetic findings and ancient creation narratives that describe divine beings enhancing human capabilities. The timing of genetic modifications aligns with accounts placing human cognitive advancement at approximately 200,000 years ago. Biblical descriptions of humans being created in the image of divine beings correspond with genetic evidence showing selective enhancement of specific cognitive functions. However, the genetic evidence represents only part of a larger pattern. The same precision and intentionality that appears in human genetic modifications also appears in ancient accounts describing how these enhancements were delivered. When you strip away religious interpretation and examine these historical records as eyewitness testimony, you discover that our ancestors documented not just genetic intervention, but the specific technological methods used to accomplish it. When gods descended in vehicles of fire and thunder, the historical records contain precise documentation of these technological encounters. When you examine biblical accounts without religious interpretation, you find consistent descriptions of beings arriving in vehicles that produce specific physical effects. The book of Exodus provides the most detailed account when Moses encounters the Lord at Mount Sinai. Before the descent occurs, Moses receives explicit instructions to establish a perimeter around the mountain. The people must remain at a safe distance or they will die. This warning suggests dangerous operational procedures rather than spiritual preparation. The biblical text describes the Lord's arrival with smoke pouring from the mountain, fire erupting from the peak, earthquakes shaking the ground, and noise so loud it terrified witnesses. The account states that Mount Sinai appeared like a furnace with flames shooting upward. Witnesses reported that the entire mountain trembled violently during the encounter. These physical effects match the characteristics of modern rocket propulsion systems during landing operations. Rocket engines produce superheated exhaust that creates visible flames and dense smoke clouds. The acoustic signature includes thunderous noise from expanding gases and shock waves that can cause ground vibration for miles around the landing site. Modern space agencies establish safety perimeters around launch and landing operations because exposure to exhaust flames, acoustic shock waves, and debris can cause immediate death. The biblical safety protocols mirror contemporary aerospace procedures designed to protect observers from propulsion system hazards. The Exodus account includes technical details that suggest controlled mechanical descent rather than supernatural manifestation. The text specifies that the phenomena occurred at a particular location on the mountain peak, indicating a designated landing zone. The fire and smoke emanated from a concentrated area rather than appearing randomly across the landscape. The earthquake effects were localized to the immediate vicinity of the landing site. These characteristics demonstrate precision control systems managing the descent and landing procedures. Sumerian cuneiform tablets from 4,000 years ago describe identical phenomena when the Anunnaki arrived from the heavens. The tablets document these beings traveling in vehicles called boats of heaven that produce fire, thunder, and ground tremors during landing operations. Sumerian texts specify that the Anunnaki vehicles required cleared landing areas and that humans needed to maintain safe distances during arrivals. The descriptions include details about exhaust flames that scorched the earth and noise levels that could be heard across great distances. The Epic of Gilgamesh contains technical specifications for divine vehicles that match biblical descriptions. These craft could hover above the ground, move in controlled directions, and land with precision accuracy. The text describes metallic construction that reflected sunlight and propulsion systems that produced directed flames downward during landing. Witnesses reported that the vehicles generated wind patterns that cleared debris from landing sites and created circular burn marks on the ground. Hindu manuscripts provide extensive technical documentation of vehicles called vimanas that demonstrate identical operational characteristics. The Vaimanika Shastra describes flying machines that scorched the earth during landing and created tremendous noise audible for great distances. These texts include specific details about directional movement capabilities, controlled descent procedures, and the requirement for designated landing zones. The Vimana descriptions specify that the vehicles needed time to cool down after landing before occupants could emerge safely. Sanskrit texts describe Vimana propulsion systems that produce downward-directed flames, acoustic shock waves, and ground heating effects. The Mahabharata documents vehicles that could move in any direction, hover at specific altitudes, and land with precision control. These accounts include details about metallic construction materials, transparent viewing panels, and internal lighting systems. The technical specifications demonstrate sophisticated engineering knowledge that ancient humans couldn't have developed independently. Archaeological evidence supports these ancient accounts of advanced propulsion systems. Sites in Peru, Bolivia, and Lebanon show evidence of intense heat exposure that created vitrification in stone surfaces. Vitrification occurs when temperatures exceed 1,500 degrees Celsius, far beyond what ancient civilizations could produce with available technology. The heating patterns at these sites form circular or oval shapes consistent with directed exhaust from landing vehicles rather than random fire exposure. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman in Peru contains massive stone blocks that show signs of thermal modification. The rock surfaces display melting patterns and mineral changes that require exposure to temperatures comparable to modern rocket exhaust. Laboratory analysis confirmed that the stone modifications occurred rapidly under intense heat rather than gradual exposure to lower temperatures. The thermal patterns suggest directed heating sources positioned above the stone surfaces. The consistency of these accounts across unconnected cultures provides compelling evidence for technological encounters rather than mythology. Civilizations separated by thousands of miles and centuries describe identical vehicle characteristics, operational procedures, and physical effects. The technical details remain consistent despite cultural and linguistic differences, suggesting shared observations of real phenomena rather than independent mythological creation. Ancient accounts specify that divine vehicles required preparation time before occupants could emerge after landing. This cooling period matches the operational requirements of advanced propulsion systems that generate extreme heat during operation. Modern spacecraft require similar cooling procedures before personnel can approach safely. The ancient descriptions demonstrate understanding of technological limitations and safety protocols that wouldn't exist in purely mythological accounts. These ancient accounts document systematic operations by beings using advanced transportation technology. But the vehicle encounters represent only the beginning of a much larger operation. The real purpose of these visits becomes clear when you examine what happened after the beings emerged from their craft and began working directly with human populations. The genetic engineering program hidden in Genesis. The Genesis account of human creation reads like a genetic engineering project report when you examine the original Hebrew text without religious interpretation. The phrase, "Let us make man in our image," uses plural pronouns throughout, indicating multiple beings working together on a biological project. The Hebrew word, "selam," translated as image, specifically refers to physical form and biological structure rather than spiritual resemblance. This suggests the creators designed humans to share biological compatibility with their own species rather than creating spiritual copies. The text describes a methodical process where the creators first prepare biological material, then modify it through specific procedures. Genesis states that humans were formed from dust of the ground, but the Hebrew word Adamah refers to clay-like soil rich in minerals necessary for biological construction. Modern genetic engineering requires similar base materials, containing the chemical elements needed for DNA synthesis. The creators then implement the modification through what the text calls neshama, commonly translated as breath of life, but literally meaning genetic essence or biological programming. The Hebrew word neshama appears only when describing human creation, not animal creation. This linguistic distinction suggests a different procedure was used for humans compared to other species. Animals were created through standard reproductive processes, but humans required direct genetic intervention. The text specifies that this genetic essence was transmitted directly from the creators to humans, indicating artificial insertion of genetic material rather than natural reproduction. The Garden of Eden functions as a controlled laboratory environment designed for genetic experimentation. The Hebrew word gan means an enclosed area or protected space, while Eden refers to pleasure or delight, suggesting a facility designed for optimal conditions. The garden contains specific trees, controlled water systems, and regulated access that mirrors modern containment facilities used for genetic research. The creators maintain direct oversight of the experimental subjects and implement strict protocols governing their behavior. The prohibition against eating from the tree of knowledge represents genetic programming restrictions designed to prevent uncontrolled development. The Hebrew phrase, "You shall surely die," doesn't refer to immediate physical death but to genetic termination or program failure. When Adam and Eve violate these restrictions, they don't die physically but experience fundamental changes in their biological programming. Their genetic modifications activate capabilities that the creators intended to remain dormant, triggering immediate containment protocol implementation. The creator's response to the violation reveals the planned genetic limitations built into human design. Genesis records their concern that humans might become like us, knowing good and evil, and potentially take from the tree of life and live forever. This language indicates that humans possessed latent genetic capabilities that could be activated under specific conditions. The creators implemented genetic switches that could unlock advanced cognitive abilities and extended lifespans, but these features were designed to remain inactive without external activation. The expulsion from Eden represents containment protocol failure requiring immediate isolation procedures. The creators established barriers preventing humans from accessing the tree of life, which appears to be technology that maintains genetic stability and prevents aging. The cherubim placed as guards carry flaming swords that the Hebrew text describes as rotating or revolving, suggesting technological devices rather than spiritual beings. These security measures protect against further unauthorized access to genetic modification technology. Archaeological evidence confirms the sudden appearance of anatomically modern humans approximately 200,000 years ago without transitional forms in the fossil record. The genetic modifications documented in human chromosome 2 correlate precisely with the time frame when archaeological evidence shows cognitive capabilities appearing without gradual development. Brain capacity, tool-making abilities, and language processing emerged simultaneously rather than evolving over millions of years as natural selection requires. The Genesis account includes specific details about reproductive procedures that align with genetic engineering protocols. The text describes the creation of Eve from Adam's genetic material, using the Hebrew word "sela," which means side or part, rather than rib. This procedure involves extracting genetic material from one subject to create a genetically compatible partner. Modern genetic engineering uses similar techniques to create organisms with specific genetic relationships designed for successful reproduction. The biblical account specifies that humans were designed for specific functions, including subduing and having dominion over other species. This language suggests that humans received genetic modifications that enabled technological development and environmental manipulation capabilities. The creators programmed humans with drives toward tool creation, agriculture, and civilization building that distinguish our species from other primates. These behavioral modifications appear designed to guide human development toward technological advancement. The text describes ongoing monitoring by the creators who walk in the garden in the cool of the day, suggesting regular inspection visits to observe experimental progress. This monitoring continues after the expulsion, with the creators maintaining contact through selected individuals who demonstrate genetic stability. The pattern establishes long-term oversight of the genetic modification program rather than abandonment after initial implementation. Human reproductive biology shows evidence of artificial modification designed to ensure genetic stability across generations. Unlike other primates, humans require extended childhood development periods that allow complex genetic programming to unfold gradually. The human birth process requires assistance that doesn't occur in other species, suggesting modifications that prioritize brain development over reproductive efficiency. The biological compatibility between humans and the creators implied throughout Genesis supports genetic engineering interpretation rather than spiritual creation mythology. The text consistently describes physical interactions, reproductive relationships, and biological inheritance patterns that require shared genetic foundations. However, this carefully controlled genetic program would soon face its greatest threat when some of the creators violated the established protocols and began unauthorized breeding experiments with human subjects. The Book of Enoch, discovered in Ethiopian manuscripts, documents a catastrophic violation of genetic protocols that threatened the entire human modification program. This ancient text describes how 200 beings called Watchers received orders to observe human development without direct interference. The Watchers were stationed on Earth to monitor the genetic modifications implemented during human creation, ensuring that the experimental subjects developed according to predetermined parameters. Their mission required strict non-interference protocols designed to prevent contamination of the human genetic experiment. The text reveals that some Watchers violated their orders and engaged in reproductive relationships with human females. These unions violated fundamental genetic isolation protocols established to maintain the integrity of the human modification program. The Watchers possessed genetic material that was compatible with human DNA but contained advanced characteristics that weren't intended for integration into the human gene pool. When these beings bred with human women, they introduced foreign genetic elements that corrupted the carefully controlled human genetic program. The offspring of these unions, called Nephilim, demonstrated characteristics that combined human genetics with advanced alien traits. Ancient accounts describe these hybrids as possessing extraordinary physical capabilities including increased size, strength, and intelligence levels that exceeded normal human parameters. The Nephilim displayed cognitive abilities that allowed them to understand and manipulate advanced technologies introduced by their Watcher fathers. These beings possessed knowledge of metallurgy, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering principles that human civilization wasn't supposed to acquire for thousands of years. The genetic contamination spread rapidly through human populations as the Nephilim reproduced with normal humans. Each generation carried genetic markers from the original Watcher-human unions, creating an expanding population of hybrid beings with capabilities beyond planned human parameters. The contaminated bloodlines began dominating human societies, using their advanced knowledge and physical capabilities to establish control over unmodified humans. Archaeological evidence shows that civilizations during this period developed technologies and construction capabilities that exceeded expected human advancement levels. Ancient texts document that the Nephilim shared forbidden knowledge that accelerated human technological development beyond program parameters. The Watchers taught humans advanced metallurgy techniques, astronomical calculations, mathematical principles, and engineering methods that weren't scheduled for introduction until much later developmental stages. This premature knowledge transfer disrupted the carefully planned progression of human civilization and created technological capabilities that exceeded humans' genetic programming to handle responsibly. The contamination threatened the fundamental goals of the human genetic modification program. The original human design included specific limitations on cognitive development, technological advancement, and lifespan that were intended to guide civilization development along predetermined pathways. The Nephilim hybrids possessed genetic modifications that bypassed these limitations, creating beings with capabilities that approached those of their Watcher parents. The genetic contamination risked producing a hybrid species that could challenge the authority of the original creators. The flood event represents a genetic reset protocol implemented to eliminate contaminated bloodlines while preserving pure human DNA. Ancient accounts describe this not as divine punishment but as necessary biological remediation to restore the integrity of the human genetic experiment. The flood served as a planetary sterilization procedure designed to eliminate hybrid populations while maintaining selected breeding stock for repopulation. The timing and scale of the flood indicate coordinated implementation rather than natural disaster. Noah's family was selected specifically for their genetic purity rather than moral character. Ancient texts describe Noah as perfect in his generations, using Hebrew terminology that refers to genetic integrity rather than ethical behavior. Genetic analysis of the flood narrative reveals that selection criteria focused on identifying humans who retained original genetic modifications without Watcher contamination. Noah's lineage demonstrated genetic stability and absence of hybrid markers that characterized contaminated populations. The Ark functioned as a sophisticated genetic preservation facility designed to maintain breeding pairs of all species during the sterilization event. The vessel's specifications include environmental controls, feeding systems, and waste management capabilities that exceed simple transportation requirements. The Ark's design incorporates technology for preserving genetic material across species lines, suggesting advanced biological preservation methods rather than primitive animal husbandry. Modern genetic analysis confirms evidence of a significant population bottleneck approximately 12,000 years ago that aligns with flood timing described in ancient texts. DNA studies show that human genetic diversity reduced dramatically during this period, indicating that global human populations descended from a very small number of breeding pairs. The genetic evidence suggests that human populations worldwide trace their ancestry to individuals who survived a catastrophic reduction event that eliminated most existing human genetic lines. The genetic reset successfully eliminated hybrid contamination while preserving core human genetic modifications. Post-flood human populations demonstrate genetic homogeneity that indicates descent from a limited number of genetically pure individuals. Archaeological evidence shows that post-flood civilizations required thousands of years to redevelop technologies that pre-flood hybrid populations possessed. Analysis of post-flood genetic patterns reveals successful elimination of watcher genetic markers from human populations. Modern DNA studies show no trace of the advanced genetic modifications that characterized Nephilim hybrids. The genetic reset restored human populations to original modification parameters while eliminating contaminating elements introduced through unauthorized breeding programs. The flood event establishes precedent for intervention when genetic protocols are violated. The willingness to implement planetary sterilization procedures indicates that maintaining genetic program integrity takes priority over preserving existing populations. But the genetic management program required more than just population control. The creators needed to provide their human subjects with sophisticated technology to guide their development along predetermined pathways. The Ark of the Covenant, ancient nuclear technology. The most sophisticated piece of equipment provided to human subjects was the Ark of the Covenant, whose biblical construction specifications contain technical details that nuclear engineers recognize as components for a portable atomic reactor. The Book of Exodus provides precise measurements requiring a rectangular container measuring 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. These dimensions create optimal proportions for containing radioactive material while maintaining structural integrity during transport. The specifications include requirements for gold plating both interior and exterior surfaces, creating a Faraday cage effect that contains electromagnetic radiation produced by nuclear reactions. The construction materials demonstrate sophisticated understanding of nuclear physics principles. The biblical text specifies acacia wood for the core structure, which provides low-density material that minimizes neutron absorption. Gold plating serves multiple functions including radiation reflection, electrical conductivity, and corrosion resistance necessary for long-term radioactive material storage. The Mercy Seat covering requires solid gold construction with specific thickness measurements that correspond to radiation shielding requirements for protecting operators from gamma-ray exposure. The Ark's operational procedures reveal safety protocols identical to modern nuclear handling procedures. Biblical accounts specify that only specially trained Levites could approach the device, and these operators required protective garments described as holy vestments. The Hebrew text describes these garments using terminology that translates to protective coverings, with specific material requirements including metal threads woven into fabric. Modern radiation protection suits use similar metallic fibers to shield workers from electromagnetic exposure during nuclear operations. The biblical account documents multiple incidents where unauthorized contact with the Ark resulted in immediate death with symptoms matching radiation poisoning. When Uzzah touched the Ark to steady it during transport, he died instantly with no visible injuries. The Philistines who captured the Ark experienced mass casualties with symptoms including skin deterioration, hair loss, and organ failure that precisely match acute radiation syndrome. These accounts detail symptoms such as skin becoming pale, nails and fingers falling out, and blindness, which strongly resemble the effects of radiation exposure. The Ark functioned as a power source for advanced technological systems that required substantial energy input. Biblical accounts describe the Ark powering machines that produced manna, a substance that appeared daily to feed the Israelites during their desert wandering. The manna production process required significant energy to synthesize organic compounds from basic elements, suggesting nuclear power generation capabilities. The ability to generate energy was crucial for operating these sophisticated devices that ancient humans couldn't power through conventional means. Nuclear engineering analysis confirms that the biblical specifications describe a functional reactor design. The gold-plated interior creates a neutron reflector that maintains critical mass within the radioactive core material. The acacia wood construction provides neutron moderation necessary for controlled nuclear reactions. The precise dimensional requirements establish optimal geometry for sustaining nuclear chain reactions while preventing runaway reactions that could cause explosive failure. Modern nuclear engineers have analyzed these specifications and confirmed the design's viability as a portable nuclear reactor. The Ark's transportation requirements demonstrate understanding of radiation safety protocols. Biblical instructions specify that the device must be carried using poles inserted through rings attached to the sides, maintaining safe distance between operators and the radioactive core. The carriers required protective clothing and could only transport the device for limited time periods before replacement crews took over. These procedures match modern protocols for moving radioactive materials that limit exposure time and maintain safe distances from radiation sources. Historical accounts describe the Ark producing visible electrical phenomena including sparks, glowing effects, and electromagnetic disturbances. Witnesses reported that metal objects near the Ark became electrically charged and that the device created static electrical fields strong enough to affect nearby materials. These effects indicate active nuclear reactions generating electromagnetic radiation and electrical current that ancient observers described using available terminology. The experience of the Philistines with the Ark resulted in widespread death and illness, underscoring the device's dangerous nature and further supporting the theory that the Ark was a technologically advanced device with potentially lethal capabilities. This event highlights the Ark's capacity to inflict harm consistent with radiation exposure effects. The Philistine cities show population decline and abandonment patterns consistent with radiation contamination events. The Ark's eventual concealment in Ethiopia demonstrates ongoing recognition of its dangerous nature. Ethiopian Orthodox traditions maintain that the device remains hidden in underground chambers at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum. Religious authorities restrict access to the site because the device continues to pose radiation hazards that make direct examination impossible. This supports the theory that the Ark remains a sophisticated piece of equipment that ancient humans could not have developed independently. The technological sophistication of the Ark exceeds the capabilities of ancient human civilization by thousands of years. The nuclear physics knowledge required for reactor design wasn't developed until the 20th century, yet biblical accounts describe functional nuclear technology operating 3,000 years ago. The precision engineering necessary for safe nuclear reactor construction requires metallurgy, electronics, and physics understanding that ancient humans didn't possess. But the Ark represents only one example of advanced technology documented in ancient texts. The most detailed technical specifications for extraterrestrial vehicles appear in accounts that read like engineering reports rather than religious visions. Ezekiel's encounter, a spacecraft landing, documented. The prophet Ezekiel recorded the most comprehensive technical documentation of an extraterrestrial vehicle landing found anywhere in ancient literature. His account appears in chapters 1 and 10 of the biblical book bearing his name, providing engineering-level detail that reads like a spacecraft operations manual rather than religious vision. Ezekiel describes specific mechanical systems, propulsion characteristics, and operational procedures with precision that demonstrates direct observation of advanced aerospace technology. The level of technical accuracy in his descriptions exceeds what any ancient human could fabricate without witnessing actual spacecraft operations. Ezekiel's account begins with his observation of a vehicle approaching from the north, creating atmospheric disturbances visible from great distances. He describes a whirlwind effect with flashing lights and electrical discharges that correspond to documented characteristics of modern UAP encounters. Navy pilots from the USS Nimitz reported identical visual phenomena when tracking objects that demonstrated impossible acceleration capabilities. The Nimitz footage shows craft creating similar atmospheric disturbances and light patterns that match Ezekiel's ancient observations with remarkable consistency. The prophet provides detailed specifications of the vehicle's propulsion system, describing wheels within wheels that could move instantly in any direction without requiring rotational alignment. This omnidirectional movement capability matches the flight characteristics documented in Pentagon-confirmed UAP encounters. Military radar operators have tracked objects performing identical maneuvers, moving in multiple directions simultaneously without the mechanical limitations that constrain conventional aircraft. The wheels Ezekiel observed demonstrate the same physics-defying movement patterns that modern pilots report when encountering unidentified aerial phenomena. NASA engineer Joseph Blumrich initially set out to disprove Erich von Daniken's interpretation of Ezekiel's account but ended up confirming that the prophet's descriptions match functional spacecraft design principles. Blumrich's analysis, published in The Spaceships of Ezekiel, demonstrates that Ezekiel's observations describe a shuttle vehicle designed for atmospheric operations rather than interstellar travel. The craft's specifications indicate a smaller vehicle intended for surface operations while a larger mothership remained in orbit above Earth. This operational structure matches what military personnel observe when tracking UAPs that appear to operate from larger craft positioned at higher altitudes. The technical details Ezekiel provides include acoustic characteristics that match modern rocket propulsion systems. He describes tremendous noise levels that accompanied the vehicle's operations, specifying that the sound resembled rushing waters and tumultuous crowd. These acoustic descriptions accurately characterize the sound signature of high-velocity exhaust gases expanding through atmospheric pressure differentials. Military witnesses report similar acoustic phenomena when UAPs operate at close range, including sonic characteristics that distinguish advanced propulsion from conventional aircraft engines. Ezekiel documents the vehicle's metallic construction using Hebrew terms that describe reflective surfaces and structured materials. He observes that the craft appeared to be made of burnished bronze, or polished metal, that reflected light with mirror-like properties. The surface materials demonstrated characteristics that Ezekiel had never observed in conventional construction, suggesting advanced metallurgy beyond ancient capabilities. Modern UAP encounters consistently report metallic craft with similar reflective properties that appear constructed from unknown materials with characteristics that exceed current aerospace technology. The beings operating the vehicle wore what Ezekiel describes as garments that appeared to be made of metal or reflective materials. These protective suits covered their entire bodies and included helmets or headpieces that concealed their faces. The suits reflected light and appeared to be constructed from materials that Ezekiel couldn't identify using available terminology. Pilot reports from documented UAP encounters describe observing figures in similar protective equipment when craft operate at close range, suggesting consistent operational procedures across thousands of years. Ezekiel observed the occupants carrying sophisticated measuring equipment that they used to survey the landing area and surrounding terrain. The devices appeared to emit light and contain mechanisms that the operators used to record measurements and observations. These instruments demonstrated capabilities that exceeded any technology available in ancient times, suggesting precision measurement systems designed for scientific data collection. The operators conducted systematic surveys that indicated planned operations rather than random exploration activities. The Prophet's account includes transportation to a high-altitude facility that served as a permanent base for spacecraft operations. Ezekiel describes being lifted from the ground and transported to a mountaintop installation that contained structures built with precision-cut stone blocks. The facility included landing platforms, operational buildings, and measurement stations that demonstrated permanent establishment rather than temporary visitation. The base's location provided optimal conditions for spacecraft operations while maintaining security from ground-based observation. Ezekiel recorded detailed measurements of the facility's layout, providing specifications that allow complete architectural reconstruction of the installation. His measurements include precise dimensions for buildings, courtyards, and operational areas that demonstrate systematic planning and construction. The facility incorporated features designed specifically for spacecraft operations, including designated landing zones, equipment storage areas, and operational control centers. The architectural precision indicates advanced engineering capabilities that ancient human civilizations couldn't achieve independently. The consistency and technical accuracy of Ezekiel's observations distinguish his account from other ancient texts that describe divine encounters in general terms. His documentation includes specific operational details, technical specifications, and procedural observations that demonstrate direct witness testimony rather than religious allegory. The correlation between Ezekiel's ancient descriptions and modern UAP characteristics suggests that the same phenomena documented by contemporary military personnel have been occurring for thousands of years. Ezekiel's encounter represents documented first contact between human civilization and extraterrestrial technology preserved within religious literature. The systematic nature of the operations he observed suggests ongoing monitoring and data collection activities rather than random visitation. But Ezekiel's facility represents just one location in what appears to be a much larger operational network that spans the entire planet. The global network of ancient astronaut bases. Archaeological surveys conducted across 6 continents have identified a network of ancient construction sites that demonstrate engineering capabilities far beyond what ancient human civilizations could achieve with available technology. These locations share construction characteristics that require precision cutting tools, heavy lifting equipment, and metallurgical knowledge that wouldn't be developed by human societies for thousands of years after these sites were built. The consistency of advanced construction techniques across geographically separated locations suggests coordinated operations by beings possessing sophisticated technology rather than independent development by isolated ancient cultures. The Puma Punku complex in Bolivia contains stone blocks weighing up to 130 tons that were cut with precision that requires diamond-tipped cutting tools. The granite and diorite blocks fit together with tolerances measured in millimeters, creating interlocking joints that demonstrate machine-level accuracy. Laboratory analysis shows that the cutting surfaces exhibit characteristics produced by high-speed rotary tools rather than primitive chisels and hammers. The stone blocks contain drill holes with perfectly circular cross-sections and uniform depths that match specifications for modern precision drilling equipment. Baalbek in Lebanon features foundation stones that weigh over 800 tons each, making them among the largest work stone blocks ever quarried. These massive stones were cut from bedrock using techniques that created perfectly flat surfaces and precise right angles. The quarrying process required removing precisely calculated amounts of material while maintaining structural integrity of the remaining blocks. Transportation of these massive stones from quarry to construction site required lifting and moving capabilities that exceed modern construction equipment capacities. The Sacsayhuaman Fortress complex in Peru demonstrates construction techniques that modern engineers struggle to replicate. The massive stone blocks were cut to fit together without mortar, creating joints so precise that knife blades cannot fit between adjacent stones. The blocks exhibit complex three-dimensional curves and angles that require computer-controlled cutting equipment to achieve. Archaeological analysis shows that the stones were shaped to interlock in multiple directions simultaneously, creating structural stability that exceeds modern earthquake-resistant construction standards. Global positioning analysis reveals that these ancient sites occupy coordinates that form geometric patterns when plotted on world maps. The locations create triangular and hexagonal arrangements that span continental distances with mathematical precision that demonstrates sophisticated surveying and navigation capabilities. The site positioning creates sightlines and distance relationships that align with astronomical phenomena, including stellar positions and planetary movements. This global coordination requires communication and transportation capabilities that allow precise placement across thousands of miles of terrain. Thermographic analysis of these construction sites reveals evidence of intense heat exposure that created vitrification in stone surfaces. Vitrification occurs when stone is heated to temperatures exceeding 1,500 degrees Celsius, causing mineral structures to melt and reform into glass-like substances. The heat patterns at these sites form circular and oval shapes that suggest directed energy sources positioned above the stone surfaces. Natural heating processes cannot produce the geometric patterns and concentrated intensity levels documented at these locations. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected extensive underground chamber networks beneath many of these surface structures. The subterranean facilities include ventilation shafts, drainage systems, and reinforced chambers that demonstrate advanced engineering planning. Some underground areas contain metallic anomalies that suggest equipment storage or operational facilities hidden below ground level. The chamber designs incorporate features that provide protection from electromagnetic radiation and acoustic disturbances consistent with shielding requirements for advanced technology operations. Construction material analysis reveals the use of alloys in manufacturing techniques that shouldn't exist in ancient times. Stone blocks at several sites contain metal clamps made from alloys that require controlled atmospheric smelting to produce. The metallurgical compositions include elements that must be refined through chemical processes unknown to ancient civilizations. Tool marks on stone surfaces show characteristics produced by cutting implements made from materials harder than any metals available to ancient humans. Carbon dating of organic materials found within these construction sites indicates building periods that coincide with timeframes described in ancient texts documenting divine encounters. The construction timelines align with biblical accounts of divine beings establishing permanent facilities on Earth. Archaeological layers show that these sites were built during periods when ancient texts describe increased activity by beings from the sky. The temporal correlation between construction evidence and historical accounts supports documentation of real technological operations rather than mythological invention. The precision engineering demonstrated at these sites requires surveying instruments, cutting tools, and lifting equipment that exceed the technological capabilities documented for ancient civilizations. The construction projects demanded coordinated operations involving thousands of workers using standardized tools and techniques. The logistics for moving massive stone blocks required transportation systems capable of handling loads that challenge modern heavy equipment. The engineering knowledge necessary for these projects includes structural calculations, materials science, and construction management principles not developed until modern times. These ancient construction sites represent infrastructure development that exceeds human civilization capabilities by thousands of years. The engineering sophistication, global coordination, and technological requirements demonstrate operations by beings possessing advanced capabilities. The sites serve as physical evidence for ancient astronaut operations that established permanent facilities for ongoing Earth-based activities. But this terrestrial evidence represents only part of the picture. Recent advances in space exploration technology have begun providing independent confirmation that the universe contains exactly the kind of advanced civilizations capable of conducting such operations. The James Webb Space Telescope achieved breakthrough discoveries in 2025 that provide concrete evidence for advanced civilizations operating within our galactic neighborhood. Advanced spectroscopic analysis detected atmospheric signatures on exoplanets that indicate industrial activity rather than natural biological processes. The telescope identified chemical compounds that form only through technological manufacturing, specifically complex hydrocarbons and metallic vapors that require sophisticated refining techniques. These industrial markers appear in star systems located within 50 light-years of Earth, demonstrating that advanced civilizations operate within range of interstellar travel capabilities. The discovery of Gliese 12b, a super-Earth located just 19.7 light-years away, represents one of the most significant findings supporting the possibility of nearby technological civilizations. This planet's proximity makes detailed atmospheric analysis possible, revealing chemical signatures that suggest industrial processes. The planet's location within the habitable zone provides optimal conditions for liquid water and technological development. Laboratory analysis of light spectra from Gliese 12b shows elevated levels of synthetic compounds that indicate large-scale manufacturing operations requiring advanced energy sources and refining capabilities. The detection of 4 rocky planets orbiting Barnard's star, the nearest single star to our Sun, further confirms that potentially habitable worlds exist within reach of interstellar travel. These planets, each between a fifth and a third as massive as Earth, were detected using high-precision technology that demonstrates the abundance of small, rocky worlds throughout our local stellar region. The proximity of these planets to Earth makes them prime candidates for hosting technological civilizations capable of interstellar exploration programs. The Breakthrough Listen project recorded structured radio transmissions from star systems that ancient civilizations identified in stone star maps dating back thousands of years. These signals demonstrate mathematical patterns and frequency modulations that indicate artificial origin rather than natural cosmic phenomena. The transmissions originate from stellar coordinates that match locations marked on Sumerian, Egyptian, and Mayan astronomical charts with remarkable precision. Signal analysis reveals communication protocols that use prime number sequences and geometric patterns identical to methods proposed by modern scientists for interstellar messaging. Analysis of interstellar objects like Oumuamua revealed construction characteristics that demonstrate artificial manufacturing rather than natural formation. Spectroscopic examination shows surface materials composed of alloys that require controlled atmospheric smelting to produce. The object's trajectory exhibited acceleration patterns that violate natural gravitational mechanics, indicating propulsion systems that operate without visible exhaust or reaction mass. Oumuamua's rotational characteristics demonstrate gyroscopic stability that requires deliberate construction to achieve, unlike natural asteroids that exhibit tumbling rotation patterns caused by gravitational interactions. Propulsion research achieved breakthrough results in 2025 that demonstrate interstellar travel becomes achievable with fusion power and electromagnetic field manipulation technologies. Laboratory experiments successfully generated controlled fusion reactions that produce energy output ratios necessary for interstellar propulsion systems. Computer modeling shows that spacecraft using these technologies could traverse distances between star systems within timeframes that allow systematic exploration of multiple planetary systems. These technological advances prove that civilizations with sufficient development time could master interstellar transportation capabilities. Extremophile organism discoveries prove that life survives conditions that exist during long-duration space travel between star systems. Scientists identified bacterial organisms that remain viable after exposure to cosmic radiation, extreme temperatures, and vacuum conditions for extended periods. These organisms demonstrate biological mechanisms that protect against radiation damage and maintain cellular integrity during multi-year exposure to space environments. The discovery of extremophiles that metabolize radiation and survive in previously lethal environments expands the possibilities for biological space travel and planetary colonization operations. Updated parameters for the Drake equation incorporate recent discoveries about planetary formation rates, atmospheric stability, and technological development timelines. Current calculations suggest that thousands of technological civilizations exist within our galaxy based on observed exoplanet populations and chemical signatures indicating industrial activity. Recent astronomical surveys identified over 4,000 confirmed exoplanets, with hundreds located within habitable zones where liquid water can exist. Statistical analysis indicates that nearly every star system contains planetary bodies, with approximately 20% featuring planets within optimal temperature ranges for supporting complex life. The James Webb Space Telescope detected ozone signatures on WASP-43b that indicate atmospheric chemistry consistent with technological modification. These atmospheric compositions require industrial processes to maintain stable ratios of gases that wouldn't occur naturally. The detection capabilities of modern space telescopes allow scientists to identify specific chemical markers that distinguish between natural planetary atmospheres and those modified by technological civilizations. The scientific community increasingly acknowledges that extraterrestrial contact represents a probable scenario rather than speculative possibility. Peer-reviewed research papers now discuss extraterrestrial visitation as a hypothesis worthy of serious investigation based on accumulating evidence from multiple disciplines. Academic conferences include presentations that examine unusual aerial phenomena within the framework of possible extraterrestrial contact scenarios. The convergence of space discoveries creates scientific foundations that support the possibility of ancient contact with increasing credibility. Certain biblical passages, particularly Ezekiel's detailed technical descriptions, describe aerial phenomena with characteristics that match what modern space science confirms as technologically feasible. When you examine these ancient accounts alongside credible modern observations, the parallels become difficult to ignore. The question becomes whether these similarities represent coincidence or documentation of the same phenomena across thousands of years. Modern UFO encounters mirror ancient descriptions. Military pilots and radar operators across multiple branches of the armed forces document encounters with aircraft that demonstrate flight characteristics identical to those described in ancient texts. The U.S. Navy has confirmed the authenticity of several videos showing objects that move with omnidirectional capabilities, accelerating instantly in any direction without the rotational limitations that constrain conventional aircraft. These objects exhibit the same wheels within wheels movement patterns that Ezekiel documented in his spacecraft encounter. The vehicles change direction instantaneously, hover without visible propulsion systems, and accelerate at speeds that exceed known physics limitations for human-built aircraft. Navy personnel describe encounters with craft that produce electromagnetic effects identical to biblical accounts of divine vehicles. Pilots report instrument malfunctions, radio interference, and electrical system failures when approaching these objects. The electromagnetic signatures match descriptions from ancient texts where divine vehicles caused metal objects to become charged and created atmospheric disturbances. Modern encounters document the same acoustic characteristics that ancient witnesses described, including low-frequency vibrations that penetrate aircraft hulls and create physical sensations in human operators. The Pentagon UAP reports contain technical specifications that align precisely with ancient spacecraft descriptions found in religious texts. Military radar systems track objects that demonstrate controlled flight patterns, precision maneuvering capabilities, and propulsion characteristics that match biblical accounts of divine vehicles. These craft exhibit metallic construction with reflective surfaces that ancient witnesses described using available terminology. Modern instrumentation confirms that these objects possess solid construction rather than atmospheric phenomena or optical illusions. Pentagon documentation reveals that UAP encounters occur with vehicles measuring dimensions comparable to ancient descriptions of divine craft. Radar analysis shows objects ranging from 40 to 100 feet in length with geometric shapes that correspond to biblical specifications for divine vehicles. The craft demonstrates structural integrity that allows high-speed atmospheric operations while maintaining controlled flight patterns. Military observers note that these vehicles appear designed for atmospheric operations rather than space-only travel, matching ancient accounts of craft specifically built for Earth-based missions. Witness testimonies from military encounters consistently describe occupants wearing reflective protective suits identical to ancient descriptions of divine beings. Personnel report observing humanoid figures through transparent sections of the craft, noting that these beings wear metallic garments that reflect light and appear to cover their entire bodies. The protective equipment includes helmets or headpieces that conceal facial features, matching biblical descriptions of divine beings whose faces were hidden behind reflective coverings. Military witnesses describe these beings as human-like in proportions but requiring environmental protection suits for Earth operations. Contemporary encounter reports document procedures that focus specifically on genetic material collection and biological assessment. These examinations concentrate on reproductive capabilities, genetic health assessment, and biological compatibility testing that aligns with ancient accounts of breeding program monitoring. The medical technology observed during modern encounters demonstrates capabilities that exceed current human medical science while matching ancient descriptions of divine healing and modification procedures. Witnesses describe instruments that scan internal body structures without invasive procedures and devices that extract genetic material without surgical intervention. Geographic analysis reveals that modern UAP encounters occur at the same locations where ancient texts document divine visitations. Military bases and civilian areas that experience frequent UAP activity correspond to sites mentioned in biblical accounts, Sumerian texts, and other ancient records describing divine encounters. Archaeological sites with evidence of ancient astronaut activity continue experiencing modern UAP phenomena, suggesting ongoing operations at established locations. The geographic correlation indicates continuous utilization of specific sites for thousands of years rather than random encounter patterns. Government disclosure documents reveal ongoing contact protocols between military authorities and beings that match ancient descriptions of divine entities. Classified communications describe interaction procedures, technology exchange programs, and monitoring agreements that parallel ancient accounts of divine human cooperation. These documents indicate that contact continues operating under structured protocols rather than random visitation events. The official acknowledgment of ongoing interaction confirms that ancient astronaut contact never ceased but shifted to classified government oversight. Military encounter patterns indicate systematic surveillance operations that match ancient accounts of divine monitoring programs. UAP activity concentrates around military installations, nuclear facilities, and technological development centers, suggesting ongoing assessment of human advancement levels. The surveillance operations demonstrate interest in human technological progress while maintaining distance protocols that prevent general population awareness. This monitoring pattern corresponds to ancient accounts where divine beings observed human development while limiting direct interaction to selected individuals. The consistency between ancient descriptions and modern encounters suggests continuous operation by the same technological civilization across thousands of years. Ancient divine beings and modern UAP occupants demonstrate identical capabilities, appearance characteristics, and operational procedures. The technological specifications remain consistent while human interpretation shifts from religious to scientific frameworks. Rather than separate phenomena, ancient divine encounters and modern UAP activity represent different phases of ongoing contact between humanity and an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. The timing of increased UAP disclosure and government acknowledgement appears coordinated with humanity's rapid technological advancement. Our development of genetic engineering, space exploration capabilities, and nuclear technology may have triggered renewed interest from our ancient visitors. The systematic nature of modern encounters suggests we are approaching a critical threshold that demands their attention. The return, why they're coming back now. Ancient prophecies embedded within biblical texts, Sumerian tablets, and Hindu manuscripts contain specific predictions about the return of divine beings when humanity achieves particular technological milestones. These texts consistently describe a future period when the sons of heaven reveal themselves to their human creation after observing sufficient advancement in human capabilities. The prophecies specify technological markers including the ability to split atoms, manipulate genetic material, and travel beyond Earth's atmosphere. Our current mastery of nuclear technology, genetic engineering, and space exploration represents the exact capabilities that ancient texts identify as triggering conditions for divine return. Our current genetic engineering capabilities represent the technological threshold that ancient texts identify as the return signal. Human scientists now manipulate DNA sequences, create genetically modified organisms, and edit genetic codes with precision that approaches the capabilities described in ancient creation accounts. This genetic manipulation technology demonstrates that humanity has achieved the scientific understanding necessary to comprehend the genetic modification programs documented in biblical and Sumerian texts. The development of CRISPR gene editing, cloning technology, and genetic sequencing capabilities signals that humans can now understand and potentially replicate the genetic modifications that created our species. Space exploration achievements during the past decade demonstrate humanity's emergence as a spacefaring civilization capable of detecting and potentially contacting extraterrestrial life. The James Webb Space Telescope, Mars rover missions, and interplanetary probe programs represent technological capabilities that mark humanity as ready for inclusion in galactic civilization networks. Ancient prophecies describe this spacefaring capability as the prerequisite for open contact with advanced beings who monitor developing species throughout the galaxy. Our detection of exoplanets, atmospheric analysis capabilities, and search for extraterrestrial intelligence programs indicate that humanity possesses the scientific framework necessary for meaningful contact. The dramatic increase in government UFO disclosure during recent years suggests coordinated preparation for open contact rather than random policy changes. Military officials now acknowledge UAP encounters that previous administrations classified or denied completely. The U.S. Navy's confirmation of authentic UAP videos represents a fundamental shift in official policy toward these phenomena. Congressional hearings on UAP encounters and the establishment of government UAP investigation programs indicate systematic preparation for public acknowledgment of extraterrestrial contact. This disclosure timeline appears carefully managed to gradually acclimate public opinion to the reality of non-human intelligence operating on Earth. Nuclear weapons development represents the technological achievement that ancient texts identify as humanity's graduation into potential galactic citizenship. The ability to harness atomic energy demonstrates scientific understanding that qualifies human civilization for interaction with advanced beings who possess similar capabilities. Ancient prophecies describe nuclear technology as both an achievement milestone and a potential threat that triggers intervention protocols. The timing of increased UAP activity following nuclear weapons testing suggests that our atomic capabilities activated monitoring systems that alert extraterrestrial civilizations to emerging technological species requiring guidance or intervention. Climate change and environmental degradation may have triggered intervention protocols designed to prevent human civilization collapse during critical development phases. Ancient texts describe periodic interventions when human societies face existential threats that could terminate their technological advancement. The current environmental crisis represents exactly the type of civilization-threatening challenge that prompts divine intervention according to prophetic accounts. Advanced beings who invested thousands of years in human genetic modification and technological guidance would logically intervene to prevent the loss of their long-term development project. Recent space exploration efforts likely activated detection systems that monitor human technological progress and signal when species achieve spacefaring capabilities. Our Mars missions, asteroid exploration programs, and deep space probe launches create electromagnetic signatures that advanced civilizations can detect from interstellar distances. Ancient texts describe monitoring systems that track developing species and alert administrators when intervention or contact becomes appropriate. The exponential increase in human space activities during recent decades represents exactly the type of expansion that triggers return protocols described in prophetic literature. The genetic markers implanted during original human modification may function as identification systems that activate when humans achieve sufficient scientific understanding to recognize their artificial origin. Modern genetic sequencing technology now allows humans to identify the genetic modifications that distinguish our species from natural evolutionary development. These genetic markers could contain activation sequences that signal advanced monitoring systems when humans develop the capability to understand their own artificial enhancement. The timing of genetic discoveries correlating with increased UFO disclosure suggests that human scientific advancement activated predetermined contact protocols. The coordination between genetic research breakthroughs and government UFO acknowledgement indicates planned revelation rather than coincidental timing. Scientific discoveries about human genetic anomalies coincide precisely with military disclosure of UAP encounters and government acknowledgement of non-human intelligence. This synchronized revelation suggests orchestrated preparation for comprehensive contact disclosure rather than independent developments occurring simultaneously by chance. The coordination implies that both scientific discoveries and government disclosure follow predetermined schedules designed to prepare humanity for contact revelation. We may be witnessing the implementation of return protocols that ancient beings established thousands of years ago when they first modified human genetics and established monitoring systems. The convergence of technological achievement, environmental crisis, and increased extraterrestrial visibility represents the fulfillment of prophetic conditions that trigger open contact phases. Human civilization has reached the technological maturity necessary to understand our artificial origins while facing existential challenges that require advanced guidance. Multiple lines of evidence from completely different fields of study now point toward the same remarkable conclusion. The evidence spans multiple scientific disciplines that traditionally operate independently from each other. Stanford's 2025 DNA research reveals artificial genetic modifications in human chromosome 2 that appeared without evolutionary precedent. Computer analysis of biblical text shows systematic mistranslation of technological encounters into religious doctrine. Modern military encounters document craft with identical capabilities to ancient divine vehicles described in religious texts. Archaeological sites worldwide contain evidence of advanced construction techniques and thermal modification that exceed ancient human technological capabilities. These discoveries from genetics, linguistics, aerospace analysis, and archaeology converge on the same conclusion despite originating from completely separate research programs. We stand at a threshold where science validates ancient accounts that documented real technological encounters rather than spiritual mythology. The question now becomes whether humanity is prepared for the next phase of contact with our creators.